a monster 4090 gaming behemoth that's literally small enough to fit in a suitcase. This is actually my business manager, Michael's new PC. I like to keep my employees' personal rigs upgraded, and this feller's been working his little tuchus off. So when Thermaltake, the sponsor of today's video, came to us with their new TR100 ITX case, I knew what had to be done. I've been rocking a 4090 at home and for streaming for a while now, but recently I switched over to a Battlemage card for the sake of testing things out for an upcoming video. And since that big chunky Founders Edition has literally been sitting on the couch in our office, it's the perfect candidate to go get some use out of the guy who's pretty much just gonna use it to play RuneScape. I mean, I hope he plays something else, but this guy's a menace, so who knows. Regardless, he's gonna get the juiced up 4090 while I'm toughing it out in the chunks. And what makes it even better is that Michael's a big fan of small form factor PCs, and the TR100 does not pull any punches. This is a fully travel-ready 18.9 liter dual chamber ITX case that's actually easy to build in. These spring-loaded captive screws and magnetic filtered panels give access to every nook and cranny, and despite how tiny it is, we had literally zero problems fitting in the 4090 Founders Edition card. Michael here is upgrading from the UFD standard issue 4070 Ti, that's what I've given out to most of my employees at this point, plus a 5800X 3D and 32 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. He keeps all of that in a cheapo case he decorated with a bunch of cut pieces of vinyl, which is probably why he went with the black TR100, even though they also currently come in hydrangea blue, matcha green, and snow colorways. I'm imagining he's got big plans for this little guy. What wound up being a pretty solid sleeper builds got, of course, a 4090 for the GPU, a Ryzen 7 9800X 3D, a Thermaltake TH240 ARGB Sync V2 AIO, 32 gigs of DDR5 Thermaltake Tough RAM at 6400 megatransfers, this Thermaltake Tough Power SFX 850 watt power supply, and a brand spanking new 4 terabyte M.2 SSD. And before we get into how that performed, I want to talk about building in the TR100. The way that this PC is so unassuming at a glance blows my mind. The fact that we fit such a beast of a video card inside without compromising on any other specs is seriously hard to comprehend. The TR100 has dimensions of 294 by 179 by 391 millimeters, but because of all the magnets and removable panels, it never really feels that way until the PC's built and everything's placed on your desk. The front panel I/O consists of a power and reset switch, microphone and headphone jack, 2 USB 3.0 ports, and 1 USB-C, with an additional empty space available if you want to add the extra Thermaltake mini display that's become really common on their chassis over the past couple of years. This is a strictly ITX supported PC case, so that's what we chucked in there. And while we went with an AIO, you can pull off up to a 68mm tall air cooler without having any clearance issues. Max GPU size is a massive 360 by 70 millimeters, a full-size triple slot card. The 4090 Founders Edition in here right now is 304 by 61 millimeters, so you could actually go even bigger than this too. Or heck, throw a 5090 in here. Those things are a third of the size and 30% more powerful. Did you see how freaking small they are? But you also might have room for some third-party ones in case you can't get the Founders Edition. We went with this SFX Thermaltake power supply, but it also supports up to SFXL, and all your fans are going to be mounted at the top. And that might seem weird, but when you're working in a space this small, you gotta get creative, which we'll talk about more in a minute. After getting very acquainted with the TR100, I can confidently tell you it is one of the easiest small form factor PC cases I have ever built in. The detachable ventilated panels make it ideal for building and cooling, magnetized side panels make troubleshooting a breeze, and the spring-loaded captive screws on the top and bottom panels perfectly hold everything into place. Thermaltake also includes these little RGB connector holder things that snap onto the triple pin cables for any ARGB devices like fans or LED strips, which I've never seen before, and I don't know why nobody else is thinking of this stuff. Those wires are always getting pulled apart when I build PCs, so it's nice for them to include it, and it's the Thermaltake logo. And then on top of that, something small that's immensely appreciated with the TR100 is that even though the power supply uses one of those extension cables to wire it to the back of the case, you can still easily access the power switch even while the case is fully assembled. It's just on the bottom. Seriously, this is genius. The amount of times I've built an entire small form factor PC like this, cable managed, put the panels back on just to realize I forgot to flip the power on is honestly pretty embarrassing. And the TR100 completely bypasses that failure point. And in fact, it actually happened with this build. We I accidentally turned it off, and then I just flipped it over and turned it back on. Now, it's not released yet, and we didn't get our hands on one, but I wasn't lying about that suitcase thing I mentioned at the start of the video. Soon, Thermaltake's coming out with what they're calling the carry box for the TR100, which is a custom branded travel case that fits a PC built inside of the TR100 and peripherals like a VR headset, portable monitor, keyboard, mouse, and more. We don't have a lot of details on it just yet, and there's actually not even many pictures of it online, but we know it is coming. So if you're a LAN gamer living in 2025, your life's about to get a whole lot easier. But now let's get back to that airflow situation I mentioned earlier. Thermaltake actually recommends orienting the top fans so that they blow downward rather than up, which is a little funky since the most commonly accepted fan layout on a standard size PC is intakes at the front, exhaust on the top and back. Since hot air rises, that's what makes sense in most situations. But as you can see, this isn't that. I actually first built this PC with the top fans as exhaust blowing over the radiator, but we also did separate tests using them as intake and see how hot each variation got. So now I'll go through a few benchmarks and record CPU and GPU temperatures. To push the CPU to its limits with the fans blowing upwards, we ran a 10-minute multi-core Cinebench CPU test, resulting in an average of 86 Celsius on the 9800X3D and 36 on the 4090, showing no signs of thermal throttling. A 4K Furmark benchmark pushed up the heat to 57 degrees on the CPU and 80 on the GPU, but still never got too hot to push the hardware back from 100% usage. Cyberpunk 2077 ran fantastically on the highest settings with ray tracing at 1440p, keeping an average of 98 frames and only averaging about 67 degrees on the CPU and 58 on the GPU. Okay, so the TR100 provides really nice cooling, even when the fans are facing what is considered the opposite orientation. So what happens if we flip them around and have them blow downward to act as a cool air intake? Well, redoing the Cinebench 10-minute multi-core CPU test, the 9800X3D runs at 73 Celsius and the GPU only hits 29 this time around, which is pretty significantly cooler than the previous test. Furmark is a little weird though. Running the 4K test again, the CPU averaged 41 degrees while the GPU was hanging around 80. This means that while the GPU was running hotter, the CPU still managed to drop an extra 16 degrees Celsius. And that's the kind of thing that can vary from system to system. Cyberpunk ran pretty similarly this time too, but with the CPU also dropping nearly 10 degrees down to 57 Celsius. It also ran at 102 average FPS and stayed at the same average temperature as before. Absolutely nothing we threw at the TR100 even came close to thermal throttling, even with a beefy space heater smushed inside of it. Rest assured, this thing is breezy as heck. Building in the TR100 is super fun and really user-friendly, even if it's your first time using a small form factor case. I wouldn't be intimidated here. Everyone's hardware situation is going to be a little different, but Thermaltake has been killing it so much with their designs recently that there's something positive going on for pretty much everybody in this miniature package. The ease of access is really appreciated, and little details like the RGB cable connectors make a world of difference. Plus, once more colors start coming out for these things, it is game over for Kyler. He's foaming at the mouth, eyeing up the bubble pink one they showed off at CES. So thanks again to Thermaltake for sponsoring today's video, and to you guys, let me know what you think of Michael's new PC in the comments.